everybody. Welcome to AskALLi Self-Publishing Advice Beginner Salon podcast. I'm your host, Jyotsna Ramachandran, and with me we have our co-host, Tim Lewis. Hi, Tim.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm not doing too badly, thank you.
Wonderful. So how is the weather in your place? It's getting colder, right?
Yeah, it's not as cold as some of the places in the US I see on social media, though. It's still sort of, I don't know what you would say. I'm one of these strange people in that I grew up when the UK changed from using Fahrenheit to Celsius. Mm-hmm. But I kind of know cold temperatures in Celsius and hot temperatures in Fahrenheit. And at the moment, we're in the bit where I don't really know because I don't know it in either Celsius or Fahrenheit. So
in the UK, they usually call it as Celsius, right? In the UK?
Yeah, we do use. We're a peculiar mix of units here, though, because we still use miles and pounds,
kilometers.
But we don't use kilometers like the rest of the world, apart from the US. Okay. But the US have got their own measures, which are different from our ones. So it's odd.
Yeah. So this week, let's talk a little bit about marketing for authors, especially for first-time authors who are not so comfortable or familiar with marketing. I think it's really important that they know the basics so they do the right things with the very first book. So how difficult was it, Tim, for you when you started writing in terms of marketing?
Well, my situation, it was a little bit unusual because I spent ages waiting for my company to be set up. So in that time period, I ended up listening to like loads of podcasts and reading loads of books about marketing. And actually the book that kind of got me into it, like Publish Repeat, had its own kind of prescribed way of doing book marketing. But I know from my podcast that one of the number one issues that authors have is marketing.
Right.
And marketing is not easy at all. I mean, this is the thing.
Right. So I was going through the same kind of things. When I started out, I would just listen to every podcast, every blog post about this and try and implement whatever has worked for others. Because I feel that most authors are too shy, especially when they're first-time authors and they're not used to marketing or sales in a company. They feel that an author's job is to write, and once they've done a good job, the book has to sell on its own, but that never happens. So I strongly believe that if an author truly believes in their message or their story, it becomes their duty and responsibility to market it so that the book can reach more and more people. So it's not about the author trying to become famous, but it's about the book's content that has to reach out to people. And I think in that sense, marketing becomes so important, right?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I think is important is the level of confidence you have in your book. And certainly things like making sure you get a decent cover and you get the editing that you think your book needs helps with the level of confidence in your book. Because I've noticed it with my latest book, which in some ways I'm much more confident in the content because it's non-fiction and it's stuff that I know about. But just having that confidence in your book helps with your sales and marketing in as much as being able to push it forward, really.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's why I think, once you do your job right in terms of writing a great book, having all the good things in place, like the cover, well-edited manuscript, formatted well, and I think then you really get that confidence. But one thing I've noticed is people usually consider marketing as the last step, right? Just after they publish, they think, what should I do about marketing it? But I think that it's a wise thing to start marketing the book from the day you decide that you want to write the book. So it could be too daunting. It could be scary for a lot of people because they are not sure of the result. But if you're sure that you're going to put out a great book, then it's absolutely okay to start marketing it while you're writing. So
I mean, some people, many of the more successful, you would say, it's online people who've created a book. They've actually the book is the end process of their own marketing campaign. So, I mean, one of the concepts that people talk about in marketing is finding an audience for your product. So, this is a group of people who may be interested in your book, and something that, I mean, I suppose there might be the odd book, but generally speaking, most books are not for everybody.
Right.
There is only a certain proportion of the people in the world who your book will actually appeal to.
Yeah.
And what you ideally want is some kind of audience of people who you can put your book in front of somehow or other, who will be minded to buy your book, or at least, or even talk about your book, actually.
Exactly. Even if they share, it's pretty good. They don't necessarily have to buy. So what you said makes a lot of sense, Tim, because most authors, when I talk to clients who are just writing their books, and I ask them, who's your target reader? And they say, my book is for everybody. They just wish that everybody reads and 1 million copies sell. But what they essentially don't get is, if you write just for a specific kind of a target reader, the chances of that book becoming a success is far higher, because you're really going to appeal to that one person, and that one person is not just one person, but a group of people with similar demographics, psychographics, etc. So I think it's a good exercise for an author to actually create a proper reader avatar with as much detail as they can put into it, in terms of even what's the name of the person, what do they do, when they have free time, how many kids they have, a proper avatar. So then it becomes really easy to even run Facebook ads, for example. You can really target them very well, right?
Yeah. I mean, for anybody who's wondering what you mean by avatar, this is kind of almost like a example person who would like your book. The term avatar, I keep thinking of those little, is it green or blue aliens or whatever in the film. Actually, I would so prefer if the online business community started using the word archetype rather than avatar, because I think it's more appropriate. But I'm not big in internet marketing, so I can't make that change. But yeah, I mean, having an idea of who likes your book, who would potentially like your book, is very, very important. I mean, in some ways, with fiction, it's different from non-fiction, in as much as in fiction, you can be very successful being either very, very similar to existing books or very, very different. So if you're writing, say, a vampire romance book, and you've read Twilight, and you write a book which is virtually identical in theme and other things, then that is actually not necessarily a bad idea from a marketing point of view, because people who like Twilight might like your book.
Right.
And there are lots and lots of genre people who do that, and there were lots of self-publishers who are almost industrial in churning out books that are basically all from the same format. So, I mean, I've met people who do like lesbian fiction, and they know what works in their genre, and that's what they churn out, like day in, day out.
Yeah. I think that clarity should be there. Even when they actually write the book, right? Because it's nice to have one person in mind when you write, so that you have more clarity and focus, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've made the mistake, well, quotes mistake, it may not be a mistake in the long term, of writing books which are very different from the genres that they're in. So I'll write my take on fantasy or my take on time travel. The time travel ones were a lot closer to like what you call action adventure time travel. So we were more successful. But there is an argument to say that if you write a very different book, then it could stand out from the categories. It has, as they say in like a lot of these story writing books, there are certain tropes and things about particular genres that people expect to be in there. So you don't really expect a romance to kill all the characters off at the end, for example. Though for something like a thriller, then that might potentially happen.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, if you really stand out, then you've got the potential of having real success, because you're like the book that everybody's going to is the new, or if you can find a new genre that's just suddenly arriving, then that's good as well from a fiction side.
True. So once this author has complete understanding of who could potentially like the
Yeah.
book, then where the next question that would arise is, where do I go and find these people who will buy my book? So could you share some of your ideas, Tim? Let's look at both online and offline, because people
Yeah.
exist in the real world and in the virtual space. So where
Um,
would you go initially to find your readers?
well, I mean, the easiest place in some ways is social media.
Mm,
I mean, that's just a large. I've just given a talk at Cambridge Social Media Day about the very similar thing. I mean, even doing a search on Facebook for Facebook groups are about communities that are similar to what your book topic is about.
right.
Uh, that provides a fantastic. I mean, there were 2 billion people on Facebook.
Hmm.
So chances are there will be a Facebook group set up by people who are interested in whatever your book is about.
Yeah.
So that's one place you could go. Actually, ironically, one of the places that I found a lot of connections before I was writing my time travel books was Goodreads,
Hmm.
the communities on Goodreads. Now, the trouble with Goodreads is there's a bit hit and miss. Some of the communities are a bit like, nah, there's not really much going on. And it's the same with Facebook groups or any kind of
Yeah.
like online community.
Hmm.
I mean, it may be somewhere like Reddit or one of those sites is where your community of people who would be interested in your book will be. And you can't just go on to them and say, buy my book, buy my book.
Exactly. I was about to say that, because each community has their own rules and regulations, and we must respect them, right?
Well, just from a just from a pure sort of, if you imagine it was kind of like I go into a bar and I sort of say, hey, girls, I'm single, and nobody knows who the hell I am, my
Right.
probability of success of actually finding a woman who might like me is going to be fairly minimal.
Hmm.
But if I go into a bar where people already know me,
Hmm.
and maybe I've helped people out, I know the bartender, the rest of it,
Exactly.
that level of, they say it's no like trust is this kind of like, it's what you hear a lot in marketing circles.
Right. I think I just want to mention I did something very similar with the Upreneur community, where we both are
Yeah,
members of. So a couple of years ago, when I joined the community, I really wanted to go and tell everybody that, hey, all you guys must write a book and I'm the right person, come and meet me.
yeah,
But of course, that's going to be really a very bad way to market myself. So I requested Chris Ducker, the founder of Upreneur, that can I do a free workshop for your group? And he was more than happy, and he said yes. And I recorded a workshop, like like a webinar, and I posted in the community without marketing, without telling anything about my
yeah,
business. But once they saw that, a lot of people wrote to me asking more about what I do and how they can work with me. I think the same applies for book marketing as well, right? When you're a part of all these groups, you
yeah.
try add as much value as you can, build real connections, and then eventually people are going to figure out that you are the author of this book, and that can really help you market your book.
Yeah, I mean, I put a slide up saying, look, learn, listen. So
Mm-hmm.
the first thing is to lurk and find out if the group is actually, because there are a lot of sort of sham groups where it's just one person to set up a group and they're trying to build their own community. It's not there yet, or there's an agenda behind the group or whatever. So you need to spend some time just finding out if it's worth your time to hang around in
Yeah.
this particular online group. And
Hmm.
then then you just need to start sort of listening to what people are saying in the group. So you can know that, like, oh, this person doesn't like this thing, or this person doesn't like that thing. And then you start learning, and after that, that's when you get to the point where you can start being more forward about promoting
Right.
and talking about your products. But you should never ever be just, all you do is just like complete broadcast mode, because that just doesn't work very well.
Hmm.
We said about online and offline. I mean, another place offline is conferences and
Yeah.
events, and
Absolutely.
I've had actually recently. I've not been selling huge quantities, but I've been able to sell quite a few copies of my social media book at social media conferences.
Hmm.
Just hand selling it. So, and again, it's because there's community there. I go to loads of conferences, so people know me a lot of the time anyway. So it's not as hard as selling to totally new people. But certainly if you're speaking at an event and it's relevant to what your book is about, then you should be taking and trying to kind of sell books at these conferences or events.
Yeah, I think some conferences let the speakers actually have a table at the back of the room to sell the book. But if even that's not allowed, I think the speaker, the author who's now a speaker at the conference, can provide enough value that people will check out their Facebook page and then go and give the book. In fact, I've seen speakers give away a lead magnet at the end of the speech. So that could be like a checklist or something interesting, so that they can become, somebody else's audience becomes their audience, and slowly they'll start getting to know more about the author, and eventually they can buy the book.
Yeah, well, you mentioning the term lead magnet, which I always think is funny because it could be read as lead magnet in text. It comes on to the very important point of email marketing. Now, I'm terrible at email marketing, I have to say. Though actually the concept of what a lead magnet is something where you provide a bit of free content in the hope that somebody will sign up to something, usually email. It could be a messenger bot, or it could be potentially some other kind of non-email based service, but you're basically providing, so like for non-fiction it's probably easier because you can provide snippets and other bits of information, checklists or whatever, and then people will sign up to your email list, and then you've got their email so that when your next book is out, or when you're you've got special offers on your book, you can send an email out to that list. So that's an important marketing thing that an awful lot of authors use very well.
True, yeah. So I also want to touch upon this idea, Tim, that a lot of first-time authors may not have their own email list yet. Even if they have, it can just be a few hundreds. So it's always a good idea to collaborate with other people in the same industry who have a huge follower base and provide them something of value. So I see a lot of authors going on other people's podcasts as guests, writing guest blog posts for other people's websites, and somewhere at the end where they have your bio, you also mention author of the best-selling book, and the link to the Amazon is there. So I think that's also something that authors should actively do. And actually, a lot of people know a lot of things, but when it comes to the discipline of doing it, that's where I see most people, including me, falter. So now I have told my content marketing assistant that she has to get me on 4 podcasts every month. So that's her target. So she'll reach out to people and get it done, because we know it works, but then we just don't have the time. So I think if authors create some kind of a monthly marketing plan where they're going to reach out to these many people and they're going to talk about their books on these many stages, even if it's just one a month, it's still worth it.
Yeah, I mean, there are a whole load of opportunities for media because I'm a podcaster. I'm not at the moment doing guest interviews. I've switched the show format to be more following people in their book writing journey. But I've been a guest on quite a lot of podcasts myself. A lot of the time it's because they've been a guest on my podcast. This is one reason for having a podcast, though we can talk about that, the whole content marketing thing later on. But yeah, there are loads and loads of podcasts out there. Many of them who've got podcast hosts who aren't particularly social, and would be glad to have people pitching them to be a guest. But one thing I would suggest, if you are any kind of media, so like a Facebook Live show or podcast, actually watch the show before you pitch.
Yeah.
Because the number of people who try to pitch me for my podcast as a guest have clearly never ever listened to the show. And you can tell. You can tell by the you do see some people who are a step above that, who clearly get somebody to listen to one episode and then they pull out some random facts about it, which makes no sense at all. And I really like that bit where you talked about this, and I'm like, what? But yeah, I mean, listen to the shows. And if you can get onto niche podcasts about what your book is about, then that's all the better. So spend the time to actually listen to the podcast before you just randomly get somebody to pitch 500 shows.
Totally agree, Tim. So I'll give those instructions to my content girl. I think one idea is to go on other people's show, but as you mentioned, it's also important to have your own content marketing plan, and whether it's a blog or a podcast, it's good to have your own website with your own regular content going out there, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to be a little bit controversial here. I think a lot of people rush into content marketing. So this is writing your own blog, which is basically each week you get, or each day, or however you get a new article appearing on your website that people can read, which is basically a blog. It's a written bit of content. A podcast is an audio show like this. I mean, you may be listening to this on the podcast, or you may be watching it on YouTube. YouTube isn't really a podcasting platform, but the Apple iTunes, Apple Podcasts, as it's now called, is a podcast. So that's regular audio content, or you can create regular video content as well. All of these are kind of called content marketing, because the idea is that by producing useful content, you're going to attract people towards your brand, and they're going to buy your product. Now, the word of warning I would give people is that I see too many people just rushing into producing blogs, and then they have no idea what to blog about. So if it's your first blog post is how you ate a sandwich at the Pret-a-Manger in Euston, and then your next blog post is about how you went to a conference, and your next blog post, nobody cares. Nobody cares. And it's, I'm thinking my blog actually here. So a little bit of that about my blog actually, but it's, and you need to be aware that things that worked like 5 years ago, in terms, it used to be Google would pick up on like decent content quite quickly. Now it doesn't happen. So you do need to promote your content.
Exactly.
And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work doing regular content. So I would say that what we were talking about, going into communities and trying to understand your avatar, so to speak, if I have to use that word, your potential customers, is really important before you start producing content, so that when you start producing your regular blogs, it's laser targeted to the people who are going to like your book. So if you're writing vampire romance, you don't want to be writing cooking tips on your blog, most likely. I mean, there is some element of like, it's your personality, your personal brand, but you probably want to be writing something about vampires or romance, or both, or even reviewing other books. So you have to be careful with content marketing, because I think it's gone from the stage where people weren't doing it because they were frightened to put themselves in front of the camera or frightened to produce a blog, to actually making sure you create the right kind of content.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also leads to content fatigue. Even if you have enough topics, you keep writing or posting videos or podcasts, and you realize after 6 months that nobody is consuming them. So it's so important to have these. So I think that's where social media and all these communities play a role, where you create something on your website, but you don't expect people to magically land over there. You have to go to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, wherever your target market is hanging out, and regularly post and engage on other people's pages. And basically, I totally agree. It's a lot of work. But again, if people can probably have a discipline that I'm going to spend 15 minutes a day on these Facebook groups, something like that, then they can be consistent, provide value, and also receive value.
Yeah, I mean, a tip I've given people is, rather than just going to Facebook itself, set up like shortcuts to the appropriate groups, so that you don't end up seeing that your friend has got a new cat, or like your friend has got a new video. Like you go direct to the group, and then you look at that group in itself, as you say. And also, you probably want to be turning off as many as the actual notifications on the social apps as possible, and then
Yeah.
replacing it with your own.
Right.
So put in a reminder to say check Facebook group A or Facebook group B, like at 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, or whatever. But don't let. I mean, when you do this, tell me how to, because I'm still like vulnerable. But it's mainly messages I'm vulnerable to in terms of notifications.
Yeah.
But,
Once in a while, I try to get very productive and want to
yeah.
eliminate all distractions. So what I do is there's this a Google extension called Newsfeed Eradicator. So when I turn it on, I don't see anything on my newsfeed. I can directly go to the groups or message somebody on Messenger. So that helps in cutting down your social media hours to a great extent.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to get sucked into social media and do nothing productive for days. But on the other hand, I think you should be social on social media. I mean, but you kind of have to think, like, am I being social on social media to just my friends because it's something I feel like doing? There's nothing wrong with that. Or am I doing this from a business social media networking connection point of view, where I want to be making connections in a group of people who are relevant to my book?
I think it's all about striking a balance.
Yeah.
Right. Also, Tim, I wanted to talk about author branding also, because I see a lot of new authors promoting their book, but I think your own personal brand is as important or even more important than your book. So probably having your own, apart from your profile in Facebook, authors can think about creating a page for them, though these days Facebook pages don't get shown to people, but at least you can use it to run ads and things like that. So building your own brand and getting some good headshot photos and things like that, investing in your personal brand, creating your name logo and things like that are cool, and it also looks professional, and people will regard you as an author when you hand out a business card that says you're an author, probably with the picture of the cover of your book or something like that. So those are little things that people can do to constantly remind the world that they have written a book.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a while to get confident enough to say I'm Tim Lewis, the author of Social Media Networking, and to get my book everywhere. But you don't want to be the guy who's like, "Hello, I'm this," and that's all you do. But on the other hand, you shouldn't be like ashamed of it, or you feel like it's a bit icky. There's certainly a thing, certainly in British culture, about which is like people in the US are kind of like much more in your face. But you have to be there and kind of say, like, I'm proud of my books and this is why, but not just like the first thing you say is say I've written a book. So you're right. You do need some kind of personal brand. I mean, they say you've got a personal brand whether you know it or not. So you might as well be the person who decides what your personal brand is.
Exactly. Yeah. True. Great, Tim. So I think those were some very useful marketing tip for beginners, especially because these are small pieces of the puzzle. I think if you start putting each one together, it can really create magic for your book as well as your personal brand.
Oh yeah, and there are loads of resources about marketing online available. Loads of free podcasts. There are loads of good. Like there's loads of paid courses. I wouldn't necessarily recommend a lot of them, but and there's loads of conferences about marketing out there. So
a good thing to do is to probably look at the best-selling authors in your niche and see what they're doing and just try to copy.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot to be said for copying because it's kind of, and sometimes it is just marketing to their audience. I mean, you can pay for Facebook ads, and if your book is very, very similar to somebody else's book, then that's where paid targeting ads can really work. Well,
right. So all the best, guys, with your book's marketing, and we both will see you with yet another episode next month. And until then, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast on iTunes. See you guys.
Wherever the subscribe button is, subscribe.
Yeah. See you. Ta-ta.
Thank you.